This is just a short story I wrote in 2018. All was end forever. Windows Skiffler, 2018. The stench was terrifying. The van easily captured Pos, Dew, an old one, decimating the entire tribe. Calling what was our once feeble, shivering group a tribe is quite charitable indeed. But there are, of course, no gods invented as of yet to convey that concept. And this inchoate science called anthropology is notwithstanding any utility during this earliest time beheld in the history of mankind. Und, as he is called, fled about in holy terror during the ambush, shrieking in his highest volume, more and more involuntarily nowadays, since the powerful van arrived here in the shallow rift basin. He, a thin and starving male specimen, was straggling back in the rear when those devils pounced with long vines fashioned as ad hoc ropes in order to bind their prey. Confusion reigned for mere milliseconds before Und instinctively began screaming, running away, arms flailing, fleeing in the general direction towards his slaughtered clan's dirty cave hole, never stopping once to look back. But now he gathered all his nerves to go back and help them. The victors had fashioned a pit, and Und couldn't tell who, a gutted carcass was roasted crudely. The mostly eaten appendages of his tribal family were strewn about within the 2-day-old ashes. 3 hollowed-out skulls looked back in utter helplessness, laid out upon the higher surrounding rocks. Obviously a shrine made to the power of the van. Und stared transfixed out in the waist-high side bushes, hunched over in fearful hiding, until evening came and he scurried back to his rocky crevasse now. The most protected place he ever won, by default, is hidden beside a stagnant pond and 2 swamp trees, abandoned. Und tried to think, alone, sitting, staring, cold and hungry, of what comes next. No, he isn't ready to pray for help, mentally, for many millennia still. Now he is just another brooding shadow to fade away upon cruel daybreak, but a particular shadow that can feel the night, listen to each of its little noises, and remembering all this symphony, always and forever. The next day, Und weakly stumbled back towards the stench pit. He wanted now only to stay with his companions, amid the remains of the most horrible day anyone could ever experience. The powerful van cannot be avoided any longer, he sensed. They torture their prey into silent submission by burning sticks of fat at the soles of bound feet. Then comes the blood draining, a meal preparation to quicken the roast. A captive's screams carry the jungle forest only for a short while during this proven method the van have discovered unto themselves. Und heard his family's screams, one by one, slowly fade into the spreading din of prehistoric night concert. Now he wished to be scattered haphazardly there in that pit there with them too. Approaching, he froze. Movement over by the rocks. Und found himself at the moment when the van had returned for him. He pursed his chapped lips tightly. They haven't been moistened by adequate drink for days on end. The movement started again, towards him. Too weak to run, too afraid to think. But reflexively, Und spread his arms outward to brace his falling down flat. The tall branches parted, and the tall victor approached the fallen Und. Looks him over and kicked once. Und laid absolutely still, with eyes wide open, looking up at death. Another kick, and then another. Finally, Und gave way to making a sound. The victor then grabbed some nearby roots and placed them down upon Und's face, an indication of ownership. After managing to stand somewhat upright, Und led his new owner back to his hidden cave, to be eaten most probably. I will surrender this. There is nothing left for me here in this place except to be held in the darkest eternal night. The owner stands behind me, with vines, a pointed staff and satchel. He will need little use of these upon myself, for I truly desire my death to be effortless and of not much trespass. The owner makes strange sounds I've never heard before. This is the final ending, but in cold honest reality, Und could barely basal think any of these poetic specifics that much later humanity requires. So a slight drizzle of rain began upon them both, as reward for making it all the way home. At its granite slab entrance the pair stopped. The owner looked at Und and made more strange guttural utterances. Unt was dumbstruck at his complexity. The owner spread his arms wide and made one loud, unmistakable claim of ownership. Unt now promptly bowed down. Looking at his meal, the owner made a puffing expression and pointed for me to go forth into its somber interior first. I obeyed. For some reason, I immediately sat down where I always sit, not really at the center place for campfire, but over by the cock rise where our liquid streams are placed behind us. My own tribal duty was to bury all refuse left there with clumps of ash and mud, properly, but I have no think of what proper and duty mean. The owner threw down his belongings at the headmost of these sitting rocks my extinguished tribe fashioned around its cold, dead core. Looking at me, making more strange sounds, the owner loosened his worn animal hide breechcloth and took it off and walked towards me. He passed by without killing an eye. The owner stepped up the ledge, faced me, and squatted. Quickly, the yellow liquid squirted out in a strong stream downwards. Terrified, I stared wide-eyed, looking for my owner's forceful shaft for a very, very long eternity of searching, it seemed. Then my owner murmurs, "Dala," and scrubs off the place where there was never any of that protrusion with her open hand grooming its lavish amount of pubic hair smooth. The night begins with this intense sound and smell of ammonia, forever to be etched into the embryonic consciousness of all things left living on Mother Earth as shelter. I'll go ahead and stop there. Just comments. It's really heady stuff, for talking about a prehistoric story. That was 2018. I'll finish it, but I'm just, going back and blasting a commentary. Okay, I obviously broke it there. Let me see. This is just like an experimental reading. I just want to say, I could read the rest. Let me go ahead and try that. Hold on, guys. During the sprinkle of rain, we both scavenged for any food to eat. Slowly, I begin to understand my owner wishes me no harm now, merely survival. I'm uncertain my owner is female, but certain only that she is not as fantastically scared. She pokes with her staff at certain choice stones for her servant to turn over, collecting the termites and beetles for his master. At times we freeze solid if we detect anything around us as wrong or out of place. Thus, she waves her spear in parallel with the ground when she desires to proceed along with the digging for grubs and edible fungus. If I displease her with a diseased finding, she slaps me gently with her wooden rod to drop it immediately and have some better success. I've learned this much in many short moons with my master, Rawl. Maybe Rail. With my master, Rail. Rail isn't like me. She must have come from afar, beyond the streams of inedible jumping mudfish and frogs. To eat either is to die, even more painfully slow than being devoured by the van. So Rail mustn't be afraid of very many things to venture across such a hellish barrier. Her feet are shod with animal skin, whilst mine are bare. I did not even think that possible to cross something with. After the satchel is full of meal, I walk ahead of my owner, back to her cave now. She knows I'll flee if frightened, so it's best to lead Unt from behind. And if I begin to drift, she only has to poke or kick firmly in the direction she desires. On every hunt since first meeting, we slowly venture further along the path away from the shrine of the three skulls. Rail won't have its history repeat itself upon us both. Maybe the van have gone. I listen every night for change. When returning, Rail gathers the driest timber she could find for fire, something far beyond my current understanding. Stacking and piling, she wants me to watch this method over and over. With smacking of sharp rocks, small dry leaves, and her puffing command, she starts the small smoking heap ablaze. This time she looks directly at me and growls for my fullest attention. I must learn how to do this myself soon or else get kicked again. So I watch. Rail's hairy face breaks out in a display of a crooked, toothy grin, pleased that Unt is trying harder to learn things. She claps loud and struts over to the cavern's water puddle. Placing her hand in, she gestures for me to do just the same. All this ritual becoming that ancient magic we call cleanliness today. She waits for me to plunge my hands in close to her own. This makes her grin even more satisfaction. Religion. But I must go back now and reveal that something peculiar happened the very first time Rael was teaching me, owning me, protecting me, something that stays right after she murmured Dala that unforgettable day. My priestess flicks her hand inside the shallow water pool for me to mimic along, instead of distraction, making a sound like Vasa for me to accept. Well, remembering that moment, Rael was bending over the pile of kindling, blowing to get it started aflame. I was on my knees, still in shock from everything, transfixed at my new owner and all her immense powers. She wanted this fire started quickly, so she was concerned with its particulars more so than over my own impotent presence. Carefully, she blew over the tiny embers, quite unmindful that her hindquarters were exposed and gaping in unison with their fire-making efforts. Instinctively, my hand found a receptive gland buried between my thighs and began tugging, first unhurriedly, then advancing to a much more ready earnestness. But at that moment when Rael had been satisfied that our teeny fire was successfully started, she looked back under at me between her legs, only to be caught by surprise at my mindless activities. A strong backward kick upon my chest and her angry "Nah" is another thing I haven't forgotten from that day. She quickly got up, walked over and fetched her breechcloth, came to my prostrate form and pressed her foot upon my chest while fitting it back onto her hips. The pressure wasn't crushing, just controlling. She looked down at me and whispered, "Nah, nah, nah," until she made sure I was quite limp before release. Okay, so I stopped there.
There's no stopping what can't be stopped. No killing what can't be killed.
Something out there waiting for us.